This is the Jabberjaw Podcast Network. Visit jabberjawmedia.com for more shows like this one.
Episode number 86 of That One Time on Tour is brought to you by the band 500 Miles to Memphis. Formed in 2003, the boys of 500 Miles to Memphis came together on the banks of the Ohio River between Cincinnati, Ohio, and Newport, Kentucky. Their genre-bending take on Americana and punk rock has been received worldwide in the form of movies, TV, video games, and their award-winning live shows. Logging 250 performances a year, these indie road kings have been to hell and back. After taking a short break from touring in 2017, 500 Miles to Memphis have jumped back in the studio to deliver their fifth full-length album, Blessed Be the Damned, via Paper and Plastic Records. For more information on 500 Miles to Memphis, you can check them out at www.500mtm.com. Now here it is, their new single, Hold On Tight.
Don't let go. We can't slow down. We go for broke. If you knew me then, you won't let me in. I don't blame you for how it's been. You were
This is Yotam Ben Horin from Useless ID, and you are listening to That One Time on Tour.
Run for the road, 'cause it's going on and on. We'll be driving through the darkest night until the break of dawn. And we'll be heading for the cities, another show for us to play. Just get back in the bank tomorrow. We'll do it all again.
What's up, everybody out there in podcast land? This is Chris Swinney. As always, I am your host for That One Time on Tour. If you are joining me for the first time, this is my podcast where I get to sit down with somebody in or around the entertainment industry and have an awesome conversation. So thanks for joining us today on the program. It's a good one. It's the last one of 2019, so happy New Year's Eve to everybody. But I got to sit down and have a chat with Yotam Ben Horin from Useless ID. I love Useless ID. It's pretty cool. They have this kind of history with my old band, the Ataris. Chris Rowe from the Ataris kind of, connected with Useless ID and brought them to the attention of Kung Fu Records. They did a split with the Ataris, and then Chris actually produced their record, and we talk a lot about that on the podcast. So Chris Rowe, if you're out there listening, you get name dropped quite a bit on this episode, so I hope you enjoy it. Chris is actually over in Europe right now, the UK actually right now, and then mainland Europe. January, February, I think, maybe even into March, he's going to be over there doing an acoustic run. So if you guys are in the UK or anywhere around mainland Europe, check it out. Go to the Atari's Facebook page or the Instagram and see if he's coming to your neck of the woods, and go check him out. Go check out my buddy. He is awesome, and you guys will not want to miss that because he's doing all the great sing-along classic Atari's stuff. This is the last episode of 2019. So I'm not going to bore you with everything. I will tell you right now, if you want to get involved with the podcast, going over to patreon.com/TOTOT podcast, and you can help us out financially because this thing costs some money to keep going, and I love my patrons. So go on over there and get involved. I'm going to give a shout out to our two Patreon producers, Bob Foster from California and John Exton from the UK. So thank you guys so much for the support. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go down a list of everybody who helped out this year. We have a bunch of bands that sponsored episodes. We have a bunch of companies, and I just want to kind of shed light on all of these amazing people for helping this podcast grow. 2019 was a huge year for us. I think there was only a couple weeks where we didn't chart. And it's crazy for me to think way back in April of 2018 when I started this to where we are now. And it makes me very excited for the future. So I'm just going to go through this list. Firstly, it's late. As you know, this is when I do the podcast. It's like 3 a.m. But I'm going to go through all the bands that really made a difference this year for the show. And most of them are unsigned bands. Some of them are signed bands, but they sponsored episodes. And when you sponsor an episode, it basically means that you are giving me a fee to sponsor an episode. So then awesome people like you, the listener, can hear these bands and then go check them out and buy their merch and go see them live. And that money then goes back into the podcast. So I might buy some new equipment that I might need to make the quality better. I mean, there's just so many things that cost money when you're doing a podcast, like driving to a show that's 2 hours away to interview somebody. There's just so many things that, I don't really make money on this show, and I don't really care that I do, but if it can be self-sufficient, that's enough. So these people have helped me stay self-sufficient, and I really, really appreciate it. So without further ado, I'm going to go through. These are the bands that supported the show this year, and I want you guys to go back and listen to these episodes and check these bands out and go stream them and do whatever you can to support them. I love every one of these bands. I won't put a band on the show just because they give me a little bit of money to be on the show, to sponsor an episode. I have to like the band. That's the first thing I always tell the bands when they hit me up. They will send me an email at tototpodcast@gmail.com, plug, and I'll say, yeah, this is how we do it. but please send me a song first, because like I said, I'm not going to let some band that I think sounds like shit be on the show just because they gave me some money. So I do have to approve of the band. And then when I like the band, I'm like, oh yeah, you guys are good, then we get into the details. So I'm going to go through. These are the bands that made a difference for the show this year. Here we go. Protagonist. Love Protagonist. They're awesome. They sponsored like 3 or 4 episodes, I think. Pushing Veronica. Dropouts. Wanted Noise. Divided Heaven. The Guts. Carusco. I always say it wrong. Sorry, guys. Carusco. Black Cat Manor. Black Cat Manor sponsored like 5 episodes, so give it up for Black Cat Manor. I love those guys so much. Chemical City Rebels. They sponsored a couple episodes. Love those dudes too, from Louisiana. Goners UK. Kowloon Bay. Kowloon Bay, great band from Chicago. Seconds to Say. Squirrel Tap, a little Wyoming punk rock. Squirrel Tap. In Calico, great band from Indianapolis. Jason, the guy that actually was in the Ataris before they moved to Los Angeles, is in that band, In Calico. Job Creators, awesome band from the East Coast. It's kind of like this synth and drummer guy, instrumental kind of craziness. I love it. 8-Bit, Add a Lemon, Neck Scars, Dagger Mouth, Non-Starter, Longword, Talking Props, all the way from South America, Santiago, Chile. Catch and Release, Sails Up, We Found a Map, Death Trophy, Friendly Fire, The Hollow Ends, Young Howler, Chrome Lakes, love Chrome Lakes, State Line Syndicate, and Cherry Pop from last week. So all those bands, I mean, you guys really, really helped out the show, and I welcome you back with open arms. Some of you guys have sponsored multiple episodes, and the way that I look at it, I get emails all the time about you guys, and it seems like it's working. So if you want to help sponsor a show, and you're in one of those bands, or you're in a band that's never sponsored an episode, hit me up, tototpodcast@gmail.com, or hit me up on the socials @tototpodcast. Now, there are some companies that also helped this year be amazing. I got to tell you about Merge 4. They make socks. They're amazing. Check out Merge 4. Permanence Tattoo Gallery. My buddy Jacob Harrison owns the place. It's amazing. Go get tattooed in Anderson, Indiana at Permanence Tattoo Gallery. The Merch Planet. One of the best places in the world if you're a band or a company and you want merchandise. The Merch Planet. Check them out. They're amazing. Rockabilia. Rockabilia is a great company. I've actually talked to Frankie. We're going to try to get Rockabilia back on the program. So in the future, you could have a promo code and you could get all your really cool merchandise and everything at Rockabilia. Muncie Music Center, the store that I teach at. I love Muncie Music Center, and we're going to probably get them back on the show as well. But they're a great place. So if you're in Central Indiana, go to Muncie Music Center for all of your music needs. Sticker Wolf. We haven't worked with Sticker Wolf for a while, but at the beginning of the year, they were really helping us out, and I love Sticker Wolf. They did stickers for us, and I've never seen quality stickers quite like the ones I got from Sticker Wolf. So check them out. Your Button Guy made buttons and magnets for the show. If you are a patron, you probably got or will get some from me in the mail at some point. I think there's still a couple people I need to send them to. But thank you, Your Button Guy. I appreciate it. And last but not least, Artist Flags. They are an amazing place. If you need a backdrop or a scrim for your band, go on over and check out Artist Flags. But I just want to say, so many people make this show happen. It's not just me speaking into a microphone, being a dumbass. There's a lot of people that really care about the show, and it makes me feel great to know that there's a community of people out there, not just people that help financially, but people like you. You're listening to this. I'm probably boring you already, but this is the year-end episode. So I'd like to give a shout out to some other people as well. I'd like to give a shout out to my beautiful wife, Felicia Swinney. She's my executive producer. She kind of makes things happen. I used to stay up super, super late editing each episode, but I always lay with my son while he's going to sleep. And I would wait till he was asleep, and then I would start editing. And she was like, why don't you just edit while he's in there watching his tablet, and you could just kill 2 birds with 1 stone? And I just never thought about that, but I did it, and now my life has changed because I get my editing done super early, and I can do other cool things. I'm in the process right now of doing some mastering for a couple bands. And I am going to be doing some mixing for a couple different podcasts. I actually have this new business that I'm rolling out. It's called Motormouth Digital. Right now, it's going to be kind of like a podcast consulting firm. And I'm going to be helping people with some mixing and editing and just, all around branding and stuff like that. But it could possibly become a little bit more than that. I'm not really sure what yet, but you can go to Motormouth Digital on Facebook. I think we have an Instagram as well, but there's nothing on there really yet. It's in the infant stages right now, but it could become something cool. I've got a couple podcasts lined up, people here in the United States that I'm going to be working with and kind of helping them get going, because nobody really helped me get going. I had really great advice from Dewey over at Pure Pleasure, and Shane over at Lead Singer Syndrome helped me out a little bit. And then Mike Mowry, the guy that kind of owns Jabberjaw, helped me out a lot as well. So I'm going to try to spread the wealth. I'm going to help some people out that I think deserve some help, because podcasting is the greatest thing in the world, man. Like, you just get to join this community of people and creators. That's the thing. When I was in a band, I felt like I was always creating. I felt like I was this kind of artistic and I was expressing myself. And then when you aren't in a band anymore, you have to find that outlet. And I didn't know it was going to be podcasting, but it kind of has become podcasting, and it makes me very happy. So I just want to thank all the sponsors. I want to thank you, the listener, everybody that left us 5-star reviews on Apple and Spotify and Stitcher and everywhere, everybody that subscribed. It means a lot to me that you guys care. This thing has grown exponentially from when I started, and I just hope that it's going to keep going and keep going. So tell a friend, share us on Facebook, put us in your Instagram stories, do whatever you can, tweet about us, whatever you want to do. I would really appreciate it. And once again, thank you so much for the support from the bottom of my heart. I love you. And thanks for going on this little ride with me. And hopefully it's not over anytime soon. We're getting close to the triple digits. Today is episode number 86. And I am not going to speak anymore. I'm going to tell you right now, I got to speak with Yotam, and it was really, really cool speaking with him. And the funny thing was, like, his friend told him about the show, and he listened to a couple episodes, got really excited, and then asked me if he could come on. Like, hell yeah, of course you could come on. Like, I love your band. So it's really cool. And we got to talk about a lot of stuff. He originates from Israel, which is a country that I've always wanted to go to. I've got a lot of friends in Israel. I worked with some people from Israel when I was the talent buyer and artist relations guy at the Hangout down in Gulf Shores, Alabama. And we talk a lot about Israel and how it is kind of coming from Israel to the U.S., getting some success, kind of sticking around here. And he talks about he was here and he was from Israel and he was dating a girl in Italy and like all this crazy stuff. So if you like travel stuff, we got you covered on this one. But I'm going to stop rambling. Like I said, you guys are amazing. Thank you for the support. I will talk to you after the chat with Yotam. But without further ado, this is it. My conversation with Yotam Ben Horin from Useless ID. Here we go. And I'm on the line with Yotam from Useless ID. How are you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm very excited to have you on the show. I've been a big fan of Useless ID for a while. And a buddy of yours hit me up and said that you would like to maybe possibly be on the show. And then we connected. So I'm really excited, man.
Yeah, totally. He told me about your podcast, and I looked it up, and I pretty much got all excited. I'm like, yeah, I want to do one of those.
Well, and the funny thing is, man, like we have a lot in common. You know, you know Chris Rowe from the Ataris. Yeah. You guys did a split with them back in the day, and I was in the Ataris for a while. I never actually got to meet you, but I looked, and we've been friends on Facebook for like 8 years.
Oh, we have. Shit.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever conversed on there, but yeah, I was kind of searching for your name, and it said we were friends, and I was like, wow, I had no idea why we were friends at all.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember you from like a Atari's promo photo from a while back.
Yeah.
But when I saw your podcast, I'm like, oh, I remember that guy.
Well, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So, you originally are from Haifa, Israel, correct?
Yeah, I'm originally from Haifa, Israel. I grew up in Israel till the age of 5, and then my family relocated to New Jersey, and from there to New York.
So I just had Jose from Make War on the program, and he was born in Miami, but then went back to Venezuela and then came back to Miami. He has dual citizenship. Did you get dual citizenship, or are you still Israeli citizen?
Well, yeah, I'm an Israeli citizen. I had well, I didn't have a citizenship. I had a green card like many, many years ago that just got canceled once my family moved back to Israel because there was this law that you have to go back and sign it every half a year, or just show them you're in the States every half a year, and that wasn't in the cards for me till a few years later.
And so you're living out on the West Coast now, though, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
So how long have you been out in California?
Roughly around 2 months.
Oh, 2 months. Where were you at before that? Were you on the East Coast?
I've just been on the road for like the past 4.5 years nonstop, whether it was solo or useless ID or having a girlfriend in Italy. I'm just like traveling the globe nonstop, and certain things brought to me just basing myself in Sherman Oaks right now.
That's awesome, man. And I know that I just had Jen Pop on from the Bomb Pops. I know that you worked on their new record. How did that whole process go?
Well, it was around last year. I was hanging out a lot with Fat Mike. We were both living with Johnny from Old Man Markley, if you know him.
Yeah.
We were both kind of like shacking up at his place, and just you know how it is, or maybe you don't know how it is with Fat Mike. But when you're around Fat Mike, you talk about ideas constantly. It's like
yeah,
it's nonstop, like nonstop thinking and ideas. And he thought it would be a good pairing to put me together with Bomb Pops for their next record. And I'm like, oh, I know those guys, and I liked their previous record. And I definitely thought that I have what to offer them for a new one, for a new album. And I spoke to Jen, and we were like, oh, yeah, sure, that's a fucking great idea. And we took it from there.
How did the producing actually go? I know she told me, because I asked her about it when she was on the program, that you guys were kind of sending, she would send like a song to you, and you would it was more about arrangement than anything else. Is that what you thought you kind of lended to the project?
Yeah, we pretty much started right away. Right when we spoke about it, like a week later, she sent me like 2 songs. I listened to them. I worked on them as much as I worked on. When I get a song, I guess since I've been writing songs for such a long time, my mind produces it in such a way of like filter, like it goes into this filter, and then I hear it a different way, and I like put it back out. So I did that with 2 of their songs. I sent it to her. She let Neil hear it, and they both got very excited about the outcome. And they were like, "Yeah, let's do some more songs and let's see how that goes." And then it just became like this back and forth, and until I hit the studio with them.
You guys were out in Denver doing that, correct?
Yeah, Denver with Chris Fogel of Black and Bloom
Awesome
Studios.
Man. So have you worked with quite a few bands as far as like the producing goes?
Yeah, I've actually produced bands since I'd say 2002, but they were mostly Israeli bands, and one of them being one of my own side projects. It was one of these situations where I did a few albums with Useless ID already, and I saw Chris Rowe produced one record, and Tony Sly helped co-produced the next record we did for Kung Fu. So I kind of got the idea of what it is to produce. And then when I did the side project I got the finished result, I was like, this sounds wrong. I think the guitars should sound different. We should add this and we should take that off. And I just started obsessing about it. So that was like my first attempt. In later years, I produced there's this band touring Europe a lot called Not on Tour, so I produced their record a few years ago. But it's been mostly Israeli bands, Israeli punk.
So I want to go back pretty far. On this podcast, we like to go pretty deep. So, sure. How did you find out that music was like a thing that you wanted to do? What was like your first memory maybe that because I remember when I was God, I was probably like, 9 or 10 years old, and I heard Metallica. My uncle had
Yeah.
a Metallica record, and I heard it, and I thought it was my little secret. You know what I mean? And like, it changed my entire life. Did you have a moment like that when you were young?
I had a few moments like that actually. I think it's very cliche, and I'm guessing you have a lot of people on your show saying, "Well, music was around the house all the time."
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, my my mother, she plays on like 7 instruments, and she used to go to these concerts and these orchestras, and even when I was still a baby. So I used to get all that input from her, like this, if you take babies to like rock shows, and even if they're still in the womb, they process certain energy. So I think I got that, and by the time I was 4, she took me to see Musical Youth. Pass the Dutchie on the left.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. My kids love that song. We play that in the house all
yeah,
the time.
yeah. And now they were like, my Jackson 5.
Yeah, awesome, man.
Yeah, and so that was a pretty big moment, but I don't think I really got a grip on music till I was in like second grade. I had this and this was already in Brooklyn, New York. I had this crazy teacher that he used to bring a parakeet to class, and he used to have a radio on the whole time, and he always used to play the same tape of the Beatles. And I remember Michelle and Yesterday on that tape, and that's when I was like, something clicked in me. I'm like, that's so nice, and I was only like 6.
So when did like an instrument come into play? Did you start on? I know you play bass like mostly in Useless ID. Did you start on the bass or did you start with guitar?
No, I actually started on drums.
Okay.
When my family moved into the first house in New Jersey, there was a drum kit in the closet, and so they just bought my brother a keyboard, and we would just make like noise all the time. I didn't really know how to play the drums, but that was like my first instrument, just like banging and banging. And then fast forward to like 1991, when Nirvana came out. That was my game changer. That was like, oh my God, I want to play this. I want to play a guitar and be like that guy.
I think a lot of people had that same epiphany.
Yeah. It was like, it just hit me so hard, and that kind of eventually led into punk rock.
Well, yeah, I tell you, man, like me saying that Metallica was my light bulb moment. When I heard Nirvana, I was like, oh, you don't have to be like a virtuoso on the guitar and you can still make art,
Exactly. Yeah. Because I think before Nirvana, I heard some Metallica, and I didn't even play guitar. So I was like, I can't do that shit. I'm going to have to take like so many guitar lessons to be able to, I don't know, even understand that. But even like the first guitar lesson I ever took, the teacher showed me Smells Like Teen Spirit, and by the next week I had it down.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
I teach guitar for a living now, and I'll tell you, man, that doesn't change. That's still a song that when a kid like is into rock and roll, it seems like they always find that song because it's just got those 4 power chords,
Exactly. Yeah, it's kind of like slowed down punk rock in a way.
Yeah, yeah. And I always love because I show kids. I don't know if you remember all of that song, but in the verse where there's just the 2 notes, it's just the top of an F chord. You can just bar it with 2 fingers.
So easy.
So easy, man. Okay, well, what I would like to know then is, Useless ID. How did that come about? Was that your first band that you were in?
No, I moved to Israel. I think it was right after 8th grade. I finished 8th grade in Brooklyn, and my family moved to Israel that summer. And I was pigeonholed as like the outcast kid. I was just playing guitar all summer, and I didn't have any friends. And then it was a new school year right away, so I was like, I don't know, I was like antsy to get a band going. I'm like, I need some kids to play in a band with, and no one wanted to play in a band with me. Everyone wanted a bass player. Like all the kids, and they were playing shitty music anyways.
Yeah.
But like so that year didn't go so well. I didn't do that well until just adjusting to a new language, and I don't know, their what's it called, the mathematics was harder.
Yeah.
They were in Israel, they were dealing with like harder shit than I was used to.
Did you grow up like in your house speaking Hebrew as well as English?
Half speaking Hebrew. I went to yeshiva. I went to Jewish school for 8 years, so I always had Hebrew around. but English was my main language.
Okay.
Has always been, even now. Like even when I'm talking Hebrew, I'm thinking words in English in my head, so I might say a word in English while talking Hebrew. It's fucked up. So yeah, sorry. So useless ID. So I got kicked out of that school. I moved to an art school, and there were these punk kids like a grade above me. So I was kind of like intrigued with them right away. I'm like, I want to be their friends. I want to go. Like, do they have bands? And I just started going to a bunch of shows. And Useless ID was a band that I heard about that year. I heard about older guys, and one of them came from came from the U.S. and he saw Pennywise, and it was like, and you're like this 15-year-old kid, and you're like, wow, I want to meet that guy. Who are those guys?
Yeah.
So I formed a band called Rampage. It was me and these other two kids. Like one of them was my mom's best friend, her son. And interestingly enough, he was a friend of Ishai's, who would go on to be Useless ID's guitar player. So it kind of like we were in the same circle of friends. So that's how like I kind of like got in with those guys.
And you joined in 1997. Like I think you and I are about the same age. I just turned 41. How old are you?
Oh, I'm a year younger than you then.
Okay, so you were in 1997. I graduated. So when you joined the band, you were still in high school, correct?
Yeah, they had another bass player, which actually he was the original guitar player, and then they got and then they got the bass player from Rampage to play in Useless ID. He was there for like a half a year. And I was kind of bummed that he took the spot, but I was in like 11th grade still, so I was just like, I want to be in that band and get the hell out of Israel and tour. So once he was out, I was asked to join in, and I didn't really play bass. I just I was a guitar player.
Yeah.
So I bought a bass. I practiced the songs for a week. I rehearsed with them. Did 2 shows with them. This like one kind of like end of the summer festival. We played before all the all the bigger bands, so we got like less volume in the mix.
Yeah.
When sound guys do that.
Yeah, they always turn up the headliner to make them more powerful, right?
Exactly. So we had I had one of those experiences, and by the end of that summer, that was like 1996. Yeah, 6. So Useless ID were like, hey, we're going to America. We're going to try our luck over there. So it's a one-way ticket. So they went with the original guitar player. He rejoined as a bass player, and that was the band for that run.
So take me through the steps of kind of like, I mean, they went to America. You're still in Israel at the time. How do you join back up with them, and how does the band come to, record that split with my old band and the whole kung fu thing? Like, it just seems like being in Israel, being in a band there, that's such a far cry. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, when they got to the U.S., I'm sure one of those guys could tell a better story about that because they were there.
Yeah.
I just know it from being in Israel and just being pen pals with Isha, just like sending each other letters and stuff, and him sending me records in the mail or whatever. But they were trying to put the name out, so they were living in the Bay Area and going to shows at Gilman, playing shows at Gilman, meeting up with Lifetime and Good Riddance and all these bands. I think they even met Fat Mike at one of these shows, at one of the shows over there. And I was just in Israel. I was forming other bands and short-lived bands. I just needed an outlet. So I had all these bands throughout that year, and then when they got back, so that guitar player that became the bass player, he was over it. He was like, I'm done. I'm like going on my own thing, and they were like, all right, we want to record an album. Well, what's your plan? And I'm like, I guess I'm joining back. So it was funny. Yeah, it was weird. I kind of like joined them for like a summer, and then a year goes by, and then by the next summer I was in the band again.
They're back in Israel at this point, right? The whole band came back?
Yeah, the whole band came back after like 8 months or something. I think some of them wanted to stay, some of them got homesick, and then so the band collectively decided to move back to Israel. and then we'd have this thing where we would work for like a year to go on a 3-month tour. So we did that a few times, and by the first time I flew to the States with Useless ID, that was when we met the Ataris, also by accident.
Could you tell me that story where you got like,
yeah,
how did
sure.
it work out?
Well, we were all fans of Anywhere But Here.
Yeah.
Anywhere But Here, right? I'm getting confused with Anywhere But Home.
Yeah, it's Anywhere But Here it's funny, the town that I live in currently, like I've moved away and then since moved back after having kids, but the town that I live in is on that map on the cover of that record.
Oh, shit. Cool, yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's not that cool.
I mean, it's cool that it's on the record, I guess. Yeah. So we played 2 shows. Like it was even before we hit the road. We were just in San Francisco. Yeah, I think we were staying in Telegraph at the time. We were in the Bay Area, and we just played a bunch of local shows before we finally hit the road. And that was like a month, like the first month. So we had 2 shows. One of them was at this place called Old Ironsides, with Teen Idols, and you remember that band, Teen Idols?
Oh yeah, I remember.
Yeah, we played.
Were they from Tennessee, or like some of the guys were from Tennessee, like Philip? I think
so.
Yeah,
Philip and Heather, right?
Yeah, Heather. Yeah.
So we played a show with them, and then we were like, let's try to make it to another show. There was another show at I think it was the Cocodrie. Is that a?
Sounds familiar. Yeah. It's old school though.
Crocodile, Cocodrie, one of those. And we get there, and we heard that the Ataris are on the show, and we're like, "Fuck, we're gonna see the Ataris! How cool is that?" We get there and we see the Ataris crossed out, and like the next band is like ready to go on, and I meet this guy outside, and I'm like, "Holy shit! Did we miss the Ataris? We're Useless ID. We're like playing this bill, but." And he's like, yeah, you missed the Ataris, and I am the Ataris. Nice to meet you, Chris. so that was
sounds like something Chris would say.
Yeah, not in a bad way. He's like, nice to meet you, I'm Chris. And then out walks Mike Davenport.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, hey guys, how's it going? You want some T-shirts? You want some CDs? You want to trade CDs? So we give them. I think we had a cassette of our CD. We didn't even press the CDs yet. We had a dub cassette copy of our first album that we recorded in Israel.
Yeah.
So we gave that to Chris Rowe, and he was like, we got to leave now. I'm sorry, guys, but we'll be in touch, Then he actually stayed true to his word.
Wow.
Unlike many other bands I've met along the way, we'll stay in touch. We had that one encounter that same year with Jimmy Eat World, but I'll tell you about that like later on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then Chris got back a hold of you, and on the internet, when I was, looking through stuff about the band and about the history of the band, It just said that Chris invited you guys to do the split. But I bet there was a lot more to it than that, correct?
Yeah. Chris really loved our first album, Dead's Not Punk. He was like so stoked on it. He was like, and by that time they were getting up there. It was right before Blue Skies came out.
Yeah.
So you could feel that there was some hype around the Ataris already. Like everyone was talking about them. They were doing Fat Records tours, and there was just a hype. So he's like, I'm gonna talk to Joe from the Vandals about putting out a split of both our bands. So yeah, we started working towards that. We were like, fuck yeah.
And you guys were back in Israel at this point. Were you like freaking out that a band that you liked from the States wanted to do a split with you on an actual decent sized label?
I wouldn't say freaking out, but we were pretty damn stoked.
Yeah.
Because when you're doing something, when you're out there doing something, you always want to feel that there's progress happening. You don't want to feel like you're fucking out there day after day, just playing shows, and nothing is happening. Because I've experienced that part of the music industry as well, and I know what that feels. So to be in a band where the age range is from like 18 to 23, and then you're like, hey, we're gonna do a split on Kung Fu Records, and it's gonna boost your musical career. So yeah, we were stoked.
So Let It Burn, that split with the Ataris came out in 2000 on Kung Fu. Now, that's probably what led you guys to sign with Kung Fu, correct?
Yeah. Joe really liked those songs, and he really liked that split. But I wasn't the singer in the band yet. Guy, the guitar player, he was handling the vocal duties. I was just the bass player. Every once in a while, I would bring in like a pop punk song, and they'd say, "Oh, cool, that could be your song on the album." And I was perfectly fine with it. I didn't have like any aspirations to be the lead singer. Like I used to be the lead singer in my other band, so I didn't really feel a need to like be the guy in Useless Idea. I was just like, I'm fine playing bass. It's fun.
Yeah.
And yeah, so after Chris told us that he wants to do a split, we got back to Israel and we recorded another set of songs and we released it as Get in the Pita Bread Pit.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, get in the pita bread pit. That's pretty good. That was in '99 before that split came out, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but you know what? I think I'm kind of like crossing the years at the moment. Because the songs of Get in the Pita Bread Pit, those are the songs that eventually went on the split. Even though, because we were late in sending a new recording. We had like another set of like 6 songs, so we just went with those songs. So this Chris Rowe, I think he got back to us like a few months later. He like on that first trip I mentioned. It didn't go that fast. It went like, half a year later, I think he got back to us.
So, and when you guys are recording in Israel and you're, sending like your songs back to, the States to do this split, there's no real fast internet back then. Are you sending like master tapes? Are you sending a CDR? How are you guys sending it back to Kung Fu?
I think it was master tapes. I wasn't even dealing with that part of the band back then. It was mostly Isha and Guy. They were just running it. So I'm guessing they took care of that. And but yeah, I don't think it was a CDR. CDRs were like in 2001. Yeah. So yeah, I'm guessing they sent in the master tapes of Get in the Pita.
So when you guys signed with Kung Fu, shortly thereafter, and then your first record on Kung Fu, Bad Story, Happy Ending, Chris Rowe actually produced that. How was it working in the studio with Chris? As someone that's been in the studio with Chris, it can be trying at times.
Yeah, well, we all looked up to him, and if you listen to that record, I kind of sing like Chris.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I'm trying to sing like Chris, because I don't know. I guess it's just that way of absorbing when you're searching for your voice. So
yeah.
For me, and like when I just got started, I tried to sing like Kurt Cobain, and then Green Day came out, so I was trying to channel that, and then No Effects, and then so you're just like bouncing all over the place. So when Chris Rowe came along and the whole Ataris thing, and we were buddies, so I kind of looked up to him in a way, and he had just produced Antifreeze before us. So, and that sounded great to me. Like, they got really good tones, and I'm like, so yeah, we were stoked. We were all for it. And so working with him in the studio, I think there's 2 ways of approaching production now that I'm producing as well. There's the highly involved producer that's, just like very meticulous on whatever you want, exactly what you want out of you. And I have a feeling Chris was more of like a team player. He would be with us, and every time we'd have a dilemma, Chris would be the final word. He would say, "No, just do this," because I've had a bunch of battles with our drummer on that record because he couldn't pull that No Effects beat. The do that, do that, do that, do that, do that, do that. Yeah. So Chris found the solution. Chris was like, "Yeah, just do Lifetime, like do that, do that, do that, do that." And that solved the issue. I didn't think about that. I was like, yeah, the fast songs need to be like Lagwagon,
Yeah, because you've really got 2 choices when you're talking about, you've got like the normal punk beat, kind of Fat Records beat, and then you've got that syncopated East Coast kind of beat, right?
Exactly. So we were kind of in the middle, since we're not from either place,
Yeah, you're drawing influences from both, I guess, right?
Yeah, and with the vocals, Chris helped a lot. There was this one song that it's called Note, and like the vocal melody was just repetitive all the time. It's like na 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 na. So Chris Rowe changed it. He said, "All right, that's the first line. Next line, change it up to that, and third line." So it was a learning experience for me.
So, and that record, did you guys stay kind of in the States, like around the release of that and start touring? Or did you guys, after you got done, because you recorded in the States, correct?
Yeah, we recorded at Orange Whip Studios.
And then you guys went back to Israel, or did you stick around?
Yeah, then we went back, but shortly after that, we had a European tour with the Ataris, I think. No, wait. I'm kind of. I think before that, we had a European tour with the Ataris. After that, after that, we went back to Israel, pretty much till the release.
So I just wondered, with Kung Fu, did they have like territory to release in Israel, or are you telling all your friends like we got signed to this label in the States, it's coming out in the States? Was it actually released in your home country as well?
I don't think distribution was that good back then for indie albums and punk rock albums. So it wasn't. I wouldn't say it was released in Israel. It was like the album came out. It was released in the U.S. It was released in Japan, Australia. They did the rounds. But Israel, yeah, we were the ones selling it at shows in Israel. You know what I mean?
I just always wonder, like, when you first get signed, you're fairly young, like what parents think. You know what I mean? Like, did your parents grasp what you were doing by going to the States and like getting signed?
Well, actually, they were kind of used to it already because I've been on the road a few years. Already, I've been on the road for a few years, and they realized that the band was my main thing.
Yeah.
And we're just working our asses off to make it happen and to make it, to be on the road and to get spread our message. So they were actually pretty supportive by that point.
So we've been talking about, Chris producing the first record. The second record in 2003, No Vacation from the World, you had mentioned that it was co-produced by Tony Sly and Angus Cook. What was Tony's kind of his style, the way that he produced?
Well, with Tony, it was different because we were on the 2002 Warped Tour. And when we started that, before we started the tour, Joe Escalante said, "This is going to be the best summer of your lives." And, in retrospect, it was one of the craziest summers of my life. But I didn't know what I was expecting. But what I did know is when the Warped Tour started, we already had a set of 20 new songs. And we knew that by the end of that, we want to record them. So it was either going with Ryan Green and getting the perfect Fat Record sound,
Yeah.
and hope you know what I mean, and hopefully get on the Fat wagon eventually.
Yeah, because at this point you guys were on Kung Fu. Did you want to? I know eventually you got to Fat, but even back in this time, were you guys thinking, man, it would be great to be on Fat Records?
Yeah, from the get go, from the second Useless ID started, the goal was to be a Fat Records band. So I'm talking to you 1996.
Wow.
The band started in late 94, but I'd say that 1996 the band really started touring, and the first thing was give Fat Mike a demo cassette.
Yeah.
But yes, so back to the work with Tony. So Isha and I, we were just walking around. And we were thinking who could produce our record, because we heard that Mike from MXPX produces. We heard that guy produces. And I've had a few words with Mike Herrera at that Warped Tour, and he was cool, but I didn't feel too comfortable asking him to produce us, And
Yeah.
and once Ishai told me that Tony Sly produces, I don't know what happened. I just didn't have this block about it. I just spoke to him. Hey, Tony, would you be into producing our next record? Because he was familiar with us through Joe Escalante, and Joe had mentioned that he liked us. He told us that Tony Sly liked Bad Story, so why not, right?
So when you guys were in the studio, was he in the studio with you? Because on the internet, it just said additional produdu by Tony. Was
No,
he?
so I'll tell you what happened. So
Okay.
once he said that he's down to produce, so he just told me, you know what, come to my bus tomorrow at 2 p.m. And we'll work for a half hour, and then it became a thing. We would work throughout the week, maybe 2 or 3 times. I'd show him a song, and he'd take it apart and show me new chords and show me new chord positions, and I'm like, and and that to me was like a 101, like a quick 101 in production class, let's say. And in retrospect, learning from one of the best, Tony's
Oh yeah.
one of my favorite songwriters, really.
I mean, we talk about Tony on this podcast all the time. I just had Joey Cape on from Lagwagon, and
yeah, I heard that one.
We talked about Tony a lot, and I'm actually trying to put together this idea for like a Tony tribute episode. I'm going to try to get a lot of people to like tell stories and whatever. But he's definitely one of my favorites. So when I saw that you'd worked with him, I met him a few times, and he was just the nicest guy in the world.
Yeah, he's the nicest guy in the world. Very humble. He could be I wouldn't say introvert, but he could be a bit quiet at times.
Yeah.
That's what I kind of noticed. But it's not like anything towards anyone. It's just like that's the way he was. But then he would say something, and it would be so hilarious and so like off off the grid as far as like humor goes. It was like, really. But the first thing he told me, he took out a cassette player and like a recorder. And he said, buy one of these tomorrow at Walmart and make it your best friend. And that's what I did. And that's what I've been doing ever since, like so many years later. Now I use the voice memos because it's just easy. You have an idea. You just blah, blah, blah into your phone.
Technology makes it a little bit easier. But yeah, man, I remember back in the day, did you ever have one of those like Tascam cassette 4-tracks?
Yeah, I had that too.
Those things are amazing, man. I've still got a bunch of old demos that I did like 25 years ago.
You play it on the regular tape and it's like...
So I like talking about this production stuff. I'm very interested in it because after that, the kind of till up to present day, you've done most of the stuff with Bill Stevenson over at the Blasting Room.
Yeah, that was a...
Were you a fan of the Descendants before that?
Dude, who wasn't a fan of the Descendants?
I know, man. That's another band that like always comes up on this show. Like I got to go down last year and do a podcast in person with Stefan, and man, it was just... He's the best guy. Bill's the best guy. Milo, Carl, all those guys are amazing. So working with Bill in the studio, I just had to ask you about that. I'm sure it was great.
Yeah, we've worked with Bill already 4 times in the studio, and it's always such a wonderful experience. They from the first time, he came to grab us from the airport. Actually, Bug, they had this merch guy, or roadie. He came to grab us from the airport. But that whole like setting it up, and then they bring you to the studio, and you have all these like beds, and it's just like a home feeling. Bill makes you feel at home right away. That's so that to me in itself was different than the other experience I've had. Whereas like you're not sleeping in the studio and you're not living these songs 24/7, because it would reach a point where I would be writing guitar licks at like 2 a.m. so that when Jason Livermore comes in at 10, we have what to record, and I'm still like getting out of bed and like so it's like so it's a trip, and I love All Rise Revenge is one of my favorite albums ever. I love many of the productions Bill has done, even back to like Chemical People. Like he always, or Big Drill Car, he always gets that like signature sound where like, the bass and drums are going and there's like a crazy bass lick, like do 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 do, and then the guitar goes for a solo, and it kind of sounds like everything's empty for a second, but it's not. It's like just in your face. So
what was his style like as far as like in pertaining to your songs? Like, was he pretty hands on with the way the songs were put together, arrangements and whatnot?
Well, if I'd have to say about anyone that turned me into a singer, because it's always been weird for me to hear, compliments that that you're such a great singer, and well, thank you. Sometimes I don't feel that great, but if anyone did make me great, it's Bill, because from the get go we were demoing. At the Blasting Room, like the first few days, and on the first record we did with them, and he was listening to my voice, and I heard him say to one of the guys, his singing is a bit passive. We need to change the register. And I'm like, what passive? What is he talking about? And my guys are shouting back, no, he says you're a good singer. Don't worry about it. and then I met Bill, and then I sat with Bill on the side, and he's like, you got a great voice and you got great pitch, but you're not singing hard enough. I want you to sing higher and harder. And he changed like 6 of our songs, like the register. He like took a song from A and put it in C, and took a song from A, put it in B, and like G to A. So that to me was like Bill helped me find my singing voice.
Wow.
So I could credit that to him.
That's also, I mean, that's probably why you guys have gone back to him so many times, correct?
Yeah, now it's like a no-brainer. It's just family, you know. But I always try to think what a Useless ID record would sound like at other studios, because you know it's okay to think that. But then like when we get down to deciding, we're like, yeah, we're going to Bill and Jason, because it's not only about the record you'll get at the end of the day. It's about the whole learning experience. You know, many times that we've done a record with Bill and Jason, I get out of there so inspired that I just start writing another record.
Did you happen to make it out for the 25th anniversary show this past weekend?
No, we were supposed to go. Bill had talked to us about it, but there were so many bands that he wanted to have on that, and it was kind of like, you know, so many people spoke to so many bands that at the end of the day, it was like, all right, next celebration, you guys are on it. I promise you. And you know, it's
25 years from now.
You know, I'm hoping it'll be 5 years from now.
Yeah.
I think a 30 years. Well, it looked like the celebration went down very good, and everyone was happy and all smiles. So yeah, they should do one in 5 years.
Hopefully not 25. You and I will both be really old then, man.
We're gonna be old, yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, you know, that first album was the first album you did with Bill, Redemption, in 2005.
Yeah.
And then after that, you guys, you know, you put out Lost Broken Bones that you did with Bill, and that was on Suburban Home. Why did you guys make the switch from Kung Fu to Suburban Home?
Well, our contract was up pretty much. You know, Kung Fu wanted 3 records, and we gave it to them.
Yeah.
It was, I would call it 3.5, because we had the Let It Burn, the split. So, you know, the agreement was done, and we ended it on good terms. You know, I still speak to Joe here and there. I see him like sometimes in festivals or whatever. We just hang out like once in a few years. So we were just looking for another label, and and we sent it to Fat Records, and it was like I think if I remember correct, Mike liked it, but the office was like okay with it.
Yeah. Well, and I know the litmus test over there a lot of the times, you know, are the people that work in the office, and even like Vanessa and different people that work for Fat, they kind of like Mike signs off, but everybody has to kind of dig it, right?
They have to dig it because they're going to be the ones working it, you know. And I totally understand that, because you know you don't want an album sitting in Fat Records where someone in the office likes it, and you got like 5 people that are like okay with it. You want them to be excited. You want them to be, oh yeah, we're gonna push the hell out of this release. But interestingly enough, that record came out on Fat Records a few years ago. Lost Broken Bones.
Oh really?
They re-released it like once that whole thing with Suburban Home was done. So, you know, we were like, we got this other record. You want to put it out?
So let's go up, you know, let's fast forward a little bit. You were working with Suburban Home, and then, you know, in 2011, you guys signed to Fat. How did that come about?
Well, it was like this thing where, you know, Mike got our first demo, and then Mike got the demos for Bad Story, Happy Ending, but we were already going with Joe. So he was like, yeah, you guys said yes to Joe, but I like these demos. So we always had that kind of like back and forth with Mike. And then I think ever since we worked with Tony, this like no use for a name comparison was instilled in the band.
Yeah.
Because, you know, hence the name Useless ID, no use for a name. It's kind of
it's
very similar. So we every once in a while we meet up with Mike, whether it was a festival or whether it was like a Me First and Gimme Gimme's tour. And he was like, you guys need an angle. You can't continue sounding like No Use for a Name. So either change your name or change your style. So we were like, all right, so if we go like political at some point, because we were singing pretty much whatever I was writing, and I was writing about my personal life and my relationships, which is not a bad thing. But it's been overdone so much by this point, in like pop punk or, hey, Chris Rowe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did that too, and so Mike was like, "You guys need an angle," and then when around the time Symptoms, we were going to record Symptoms, I think a month before the recordings, I had like only 8 songs I was happy with. And I was in such a toxic relationship. So I just let that thing, shine. So like, I just kept, I'm going to write about this. I'm going to write about this thing you're doing to me. So it became another one of these like, relationship albums. But we sent it to Mike and he's like, all right, I'll put it out. I like it.
Awesome.
And I'm like, really? This album? But because it's our slowest album.
Yeah.
I really like the album, but it's not. We play like 1 or 2 songs off of that album live. Like we can't match the energy we put into a live show with those songs.
So you guys, the last record that you guys released was in 2016. State is Burning. That's on Fat as well, right?
Yeah.
Are you guys like currently in a contract with them, or is it the handshake deal that I always hear about?
Yeah, it's that. Like, you record an album, you send it to Mike, you send it to Fat Records. If they dig, they put it out.
That's pretty cool, man. So,
yeah. I mean, I wouldn't mind being in a 3-album contract deal with Fat, or even a 5-album.
Yeah.
To me, they're just the best label out there, and it's family. So many great bands on this label, so many bands that inspired us throughout our careers and inspired me, and people that I just don't,
I've had so many people from different bands, from like, the OG bands to, the new school bands on Fat, and everybody says that it's like such a family, like it is.
I can't think of any other label that it's special like that,
Well, I mean, the label meant a lot to me growing up. I remember when I joined the Ataris, like I wasn't like super stoked because like they had sold so many records or they'd been on MTV or anything. I was stoked that they put an EP out on Fat.
Exactly. Anything that got released on Fat, you get it.
Well, no, and it's funny because I've talked to a couple people on the show, and I'm like, I've never been technically like on Fat, but a band I was in had an EP on Fat like 20 years ago. So I feel like I'm kind of part of the family.
And you know what? That's my favorite Ataris release, and I told that to Chris Rowe.
That's awesome, man.
I love that. Those 5 songs changed my life.
I don't know. I talk to my wife all the time. My wife's a bit younger than me, and I tell her about Fat Records, and like I made her watch the documentary about Fat Records, and she's like, yeah, it's cool. I'm like, you don't understand. This is my childhood. This is my.
It is,
like,
for many of us.
It formed how I thought about stuff. Like different political views and different things came from Good Riddance, came from Propaganda. Like,
yeah, that second Propaganda record.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
Let's Talk.
Yeah.
How do you even do something like that,
So I always tell people on the podcast that are on Fat or have something to do with Fat, I'm like, I'm an honorary member of the family because I love it so much. And I've had so many different bands from Fat on the podcast. So that was one thing, getting to talk to you. I was always a fan of Useless ID, but in my mind, you guys were a Fat band. And when I started researching and even pulling out my old CDs, I'm like, oh, well, they started on Kung Fu. And I guess I just omitted that from my memory.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah, we became a Fat band along the way. And you could say now that we are a Fat band because we've been with them for several years now. And, they just released a 7-inch we recorded. So, yeah.
So I know you also do pretty much the stuff that I see, on Instagram and whatnot. You do a lot of solo stuff, and you have a record released on Hardline, Distant Lover, correct?
Yeah.
And that came out in 2012. What kind of got you going for the solo thing? Was that just you had some time and you write songs that maybe didn't fit the band?
Well, I was overwriting, I think. I was just like, I would say, yeah, prolific is the right word. I was so prolific, and I still am, but I'm working on other things at the moment, so I don't have that much time for that outlet right now. But when I'm writing, I'm like writing a song a day. I just like go and go and go, and even if I don't come up with a song, I just come up with something like a riff, even if it sucks, or even if it's a bad song. So I was writing all these songs that to me weren't really useless ID, and I kept like storing them on the side, and I'm like, I can't even bring this to be useless ID because it's like so dark and sad and melancholy. So one of my buddies was over one day, and I let him hear it, and he goes, "Why don't you just do like a solo album?" And I'm like, "Oh no, I can't do that. That's fucking scary." But the more I thought about it, it made sense. Yeah, I never did a solo album, so I did that album, and but I don't think I got to be let's say like a singer songwriter solo artist until I did California Sounds, which was the next one.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's when I hit the road, and I was just like touring all over the place again and again and again.
How is the touring like solo? Is it just you, or are you bringing like someone to sell merch, or like how is it?
Just me and a guitar.
You and a guitar, okay, and you're
Just
in
me
like
and a guitar.
just
Even if
a normal small like compact car, or do you still have a van?
no van. I rented cars. I bought cars. I brought my girlfriend on a few tours. Dude, it's one crazy ride to do alone. This my first tour. This is like a funny karma story. If I'll try to make it as quick as possible. But I was about to play my first solo show in the U.S. On the West Coast, and a month before that, people were just giving me all these like weed, like this like banana, all these flavors, and I don't smoke.
Yeah.
So I was just storing it in a box, and I just kept the box in the back of my trunk and forgot about it. So the box was full like after a month because I was just meeting people and playing all these random shows. But once I hit the road to tour, I get to this border control, and there's a cop and a dog, and there's a car behind me and a car in front of me, and I'm like, oh shit, the box is in the back. Fuck. So I'm trying to keep my cool. I pull up next to the officer. Yeah, I open the window and I'm like, hello, officer. He's like, is anyone traveling with you? And I'm like, nope. And he looks in the back. He sees like my sleeping bag because I was sleeping in the car.
Yeah.
So he's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah. He's like, okay, you could go. And I literally pulled over to the side of the road, and I'm like, oh my god, if the dog would bark, that would be the end of me. Really, it's like,
jeez, man.
it's yeah.
And it sucks even worse because, like you just said, you don't smoke.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not that guy. I just don't do that stuff.
Yeah.
The most I'll do is have a glass of red wine like once a month.
You sound like me, man. I don't even like taking Tylenol. I can like feel my hair growing,
Nice.
So with all the acoustic solo touring, has most of it been in the States? Have you done anything overseas?
A lot in the States. I've been to Russia many times till I got stopped in Russia. That's another story that I tell a lot. I got stopped in Russia on a useless ID tour. They stopped me at the airport, and they threw me in like a cell for 17 hours.
Yeah.
And then sent me out of the country. I got deported.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've been in Russia. I've done a ton of Europe. Japan I didn't do solo, but useless ID's been there like 16 times.
Yeah.
So but yeah, the one of the biggest things with the solo tour is that I always felt like something was happening, whether it was recording an album in the middle of a tour, like that California Sounds record, which it was a bunch of songs I'd written for a future useless ID, but it became my set, and then I just stepped into a studio and recorded it, and then and that leading into the 1 week records with Joey Cape, and eventually leading to Fat Mike telling me to stop touring all the freaking time, and base yourself somewhere, and let's make great things. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm like not touring as much.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, I've had you on the phone for quite a long time. I do have some listener questions if you wouldn't mind answering them.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so Matt from Krakow, Poland, he says, how has working with other bands on their records affected how you think and how you write songs?
Well, working with a band on a record, I always feel like I'm also learning something, because it's like that with anyone you'll work with on a song. You'll notice the person in front of you, and maybe he or she has some other tricks that you are not familiar with up their sleeve.
Yeah.
So for me, for the most part, I'll give you an example. When I was working with Not on Tour, all of their songs are like super duper fast, like do that, do that, do that, and it's like 1 minute songs. So that eventually led me to writing a few of those songs for Status Burning, and I'm like, there's a song on there called Genetic, and I showed it to Ishai, and I'm like, this song is so Not on Tour, and he's like, oh yeah, but then we recorded it, and it just sounds like a great Useless ID song. So so I'm sure working with the Bomb Pops is going to influence me to bring Jen and Polly to sing, to sing with me now. Yeah,
Awesome. Well, I've got one more question. This is kind of a funny one. Michael from Oregon said he heard that you do a great Andre the Giant impression, and he wanted to know if you could do it for the listeners.
I am the World Wrestling Federation champion, Hulk Hogan. What you gonna do? that's a little Hulk Hogan for you.
That's pretty good, man. We got a 2-for-1 on that.
Thank you. Yeah, there you go.
Well, hey, man, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show today. What does the future hold, not only for Useless ID, but also you and your solo stuff?
We just released the Tommy and June album. That's a new project I am involved in, and there's a song we released called B273. It's about my grandfather being a Holocaust survivor. We're working on a lot of things at the moment. I can't really talk about, but they're very out of the box, let's say.
Okay.
And some very exciting things on the way.
Well, I'll definitely have you back when you guys have some more news and some new releases coming out.
For sure.
So what are the socials, not only for you, but for the band and everything that you want to plug?
So on Instagram, Yotam Ben Horin, that's me. And there's also Tommy and June, and there's Useless ID Punk. And and I have a hardcore band called Spit.
Spit?
So yeah.
Awesome,
it's
man.
like, it's like DRI and SOD.
Awesome, dude. Well, hey, I just want to say thanks again for coming on the show. And when you guys do have some stuff coming out, make sure you come back and talk to us, okay?
Hell yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. I will talk to you soon. Have a great night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.
So there it was, my conversation with Yotam from Useless ID. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. Can't wait to have him back in the future when maybe there's a new Useless ID record or a new solo record. So thanks a lot. Shout out to Yotam for coming on the show. I know he listens once in a while, and hopefully he's listening to this one, because you got to check out how you sounded. So I always wonder that, like, the guests will be like, oh, I don't like to listen to myself. I'm like, well, I'm sure you check out your own episode. But that's it for this week. There's only really one more thing that I'd really like to throw out, since it is the final episode of 2019. I listen to podcasts all the time. I hopefully, if you guys are listening to this, I mean, it's cool if this is the only podcast you listen to, but I'm not crazy. I mean, you have to listen to other podcasts. I listen to podcasts religiously. I mean, I barely listen to music when I'm driving anymore. Sometimes I do, but most of the time I have things downloaded and I just listen to them. So in no particular order, I'd like to give shout outs to my favorite podcasts. Number one, my buddy Dewey over at the Peer Pleasure podcast. They're on Jabberjaw as well. And I love Peer Pleasure. I love Dewey's style, the way that he asks questions, and it's a complete conversation. Like, I have some questions and I do a little research and I always want to be prepared. And Dewey said he kind of used to do that, but now he just goes in blindly. And that's really cool because he can get these stories out of people that maybe other people can't get. So check out Dewey. Help us over on the Peer Pleasure podcast. Next, This Was the Scene. It's a wonderful show. It used to be about kind of like the 90s, early 2000s New Jersey punk scene, but they've since branched out. Mike over there at This Was the Scene, he talks to all kinds of great people. So check out This Was the Scene. Personal favorite of mine, some of you might not care, but Clint and Ethan down in Nashville, Metal Up Your Podcast. It's an all Metallica based podcast. I know they listen every once in a while as well. I don't know if they listen this far into the podcast, but shout out to Clint and Ethan. I love Metal Up Your Podcast. If you guys want to laugh about some really funny stuff and listen to all kinds of cool stuff about Metallica, check out Metal Up Your Podcast. Next was, let me see, Turned Out a Punk. Damian Abraham from Fucked Up over there at Turned Out a Punk. He has some of the best guests ever, and it's a wonderful podcast, and it's sponsored by Vans. You know, if anybody out there is listening that works at Vans, hook me up. I want some shoes, man. But so Damian, shout out to you, buddy, and I love your show. Turned Out a Punk. It's pretty cool. Next is the Josta Show. I don't know if you guys out there ever listen to the Jamie Josta Show, but it's pretty awesome. Sometimes it's a little bit geared more towards like the metal and hardcore side of things, but I lean that way, man. I like my metal. I like my hardcore. So I love Jamie Josta. He's a cool guy. So he talks a little bit too much about CBD oil and stuff, but it's still a great show. So check out the actually just the Josta Show. That's what it's called. Next, Talk To Me podcast. That's a really cool podcast where they kind of lean more into the metal, almost new metalish sometimes stuff, but they've had like Gwar and all kinds of cool stuff over there. So go check out the Talk To Me podcast, and that's Talk TOOMEY. And they're really cool. Check them out. Also, Lead Singer Syndrome. I mean, if you listen to this, you probably listen to Lead Singer Syndrome. We have kind of like the same sort of, market, I would think. But Shane told my buddy over at Lead Singer Syndrome, he sings for Silverstein, and he's got a great show. And if you listen to podcasts about independent music, I'm sure you probably already listened to it. But shout out to Shane and everybody over at Lead Singer Syndrome. Music Crush Monday is a really cool podcast where Kevin and Steve, I believe, make sure, yes, they just making sure, they kind of have guests on that send them these songs blindly, and they listen to the songs, and then they have to like give their reactions about the songs, and they don't really know what band did the song. And I did their 12 Days of Christmas thing. It was really cool, and I'm going to go back on there at some point and do an actual episode of the show. So check out Music Crush Monday at musiccrushmonday.com. That's what it is. And then also, you need some comedy in your life. I love Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. It's on the Earwolf Network, which is some of the best comedy shows are on the Earwolf Network. But Conan O'Brien, I've been a fan of his since the 90s, when his show first came out on NBC. But the podcast is great if you want to hear Conan cuss, because Conan, he cusses quite a bit, and he's pretty funny. I mean, he's always funny, but on the podcast, he's really, really funny. So go check out Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. He doesn't need my plug, believe me, but it's funny, and I enjoy it, and I download it and listen to it every week. So Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. Last but not least, Toby Morse with the One Life, One Chance podcast. He came out of nowhere, man, and his podcast has been blowing up. And I got to say, I love it. Talks to a lot of kind of the East Coast hardcore guys. He just had Michael Rappaport on there, the actor. It was such a good episode. He's had crazy guests, and it's really, really good. The episode with Tim Armstrong from Rancid is one of my favorites. I had Lars on the program, and to get Tim on is a bucket list. I know he did it for Toby because they're boys, and Tim and I guess, aren't boys, but Tim, if you're listening, man, you got to come on the show. So those are my favorite podcasts right now. Those are my most listened to podcasts. There's many other podcasts, but those are the ones that take up the most time while I'm driving around town. But what podcast do you guys like? Hit me up and let me know. I'd like to know like what the crossover is. Like if you listen to this podcast, what are some of your other favorite podcasts? Let me know on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or whatever. But I love you guys. I know this has been the longest intro and outro ever, but this 2019 is over. We're entering a new decade, 2020. They're going to refer to this now as the 20s. That's kind of weird, man, to think that, it's the 2020s. That's crazy. I'm getting really old, but I love everybody out there. Thanks for the support. Hit me up on the socials at TOTOT Podcast. If you want to become a sponsor of the program, you can hit me up, TOTOTpodcast at gmail.com. If you would like to get involved on a financial level and support the show, head on over to patreon.com/TOTOT Podcast and hook it up. Jump on the Patreon train. But that's it for today. I don't ever get out of here without playing music. And I'm going to play some music here in a second from Yotam and the Useless ID Boys. But first, I got to tell you, next week on the program, it's a big one and it's a good one. I can't wait for you to check it out. Tim Barry from Avail is on the program. I cannot believe that Tim Barry from Avail, one of my all-time favorite bands, was like, sure, dude, let's talk for an hour. And it was a great one, man. We talk about so much stuff. I talk about like the urban legends that surround Avail. Like, did he do a solo tour where he rode the rails and jumped train cars? Like, we talk about all kinds of stuff. It's a great episode. It's going to be the first episode of 2020, and I could not think of a better guest than Tim Barry from Avail. And if you're not familiar, I don't know why the fuck you listen to this show, because Avail is awesome. So go on out and educate yourself. They're on all the streaming platforms. Check out some Avail, so when you come back next week, you'll be like, oh yeah, I love this band as much as Chris, and Chris is fanboying out, and I would be too. I mean, that's the running theme on this show, is that I'm a fanboy, and some people make fun of me, but I think a lot of you out there understand that if you were talking to people that kind of molded your life, you would be a fanboy as well. So I love you guys. Thanks for the support. Leave us a review, subscribe, do all that great stuff, and help the show out. I'm going to get out of here, but like I said, I'm going to play some music. This is an awesome song by Useless ID. It is one of my favorites by the band. It is called Isolate Me. So happy New Year, everybody. Enjoy New Year's Eve. Don't get too drunk. Don't drive. Just chill. Watch the ball drop with your loved ones. And I'll see you next week in 2020. Here it is, Useless ID with Isolate Me. Chris out.
No more medicine. I'll be leaving now. Give me anything. I won't make a sound. Down. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot in days of old lang syne? Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and days of old lang syne? For old lang syne, my dear, for old lang syne, we'll take a cup of kindness yet for old lang syne. Old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind. Old acquaintance be forgot in days of old lang syne. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and old lang syne?
That was nearly perfect.
Hey guys, it's Silas Lenny. And I see you. That's one time I turn.
This is the Jabberjaw Podcast Network.